What's good, everybody? I'm Jędrek, he's Sodek, and today we are gonna talk to you about various different builds of 4-color decks in Modern, and if it's really worth to spend 2000 tickets on Modo to build them. Alrighty, so to start us off, we have to define, at least broadly, what we are talking about, because there are various 4-color decks floating around the format, and technically, I guess you can argue that some Belcher lists are 4-color if you are playing one Seagate and one Emeria Skull. And for example, decks like Kiki Court and stuff like this are also 4 colors from time to time. Primeval Titan can, or Amulet can generate all colors of mana, so you know. By what do we mean by 4-color? By 4-color, we mean decks that are built around the synergy of Omnath and Pitch Elementals, broadly speaking. We can single out 3 main archetypes in this macro archetype. So we have 4-color Ephemerate, which utilize Yorhinos as a companion and play stuff like Eternal Witness, Icefang Coatl, Pitch Elementals obviously, and Omnath obviously, to get value of Ephemerate and Yorion, alongside the usual suspects of Wrenn and 6 and Teferi Time Raveler. Then we have the 4-color quote-unquote blue-white, which is a term I hate, but the version with Counterspell and Archmage's Charm, Supreme Verdict. So basically a blue-white deck that trades the stability of 2-color mana base and planning around Chalice of the Fate, even though you technically can play Chalice in 4-color, but then you have to cut something, and you're probably cutting a red or green card, and why not play blue-white at this point? So you are basically trading those things, and more reactive game plan for Omnath and Wrenn and 6 and Expressive Iteration. And then finally, we have the 4-color Rhinos build, both with and without Yorion. The crux is once again Omnath and Pitch Elementals. For the sake of, I guess, completeness, we also should mention 2 other decks that are, I guess, there but not very popular anymore, which is Elementals, the originator of those Omnath Pitch Elementals decks, and Bring to Light, which I wouldn't really qualify as one of those decks because you are not really abusing Pitch Elementals. You are more of a Valakut Dryad deck with some Omnaths in it, because you have to play a bunch of lands, and you have to play Bring to Light and Dryad and Wrenn and 6 and all those cards. So you can't really play too many Pitch Elementals really in this deck. So
yeah, that's true. Like, I would say it's still an Omnath deck, but it's like a strange cousin who tries to be as cool as
Yes.
all the others.
Yes.
But like, the deck has some advantages over other versions. It can kill more quickly with fast drive.
It's probably super good in the mirror match. Because Scape Shift is... Well, yes, Teferi blocks Bring to Light, but you have ways to deal with Teferi, right?
Yeah, and
the Instant.
I can suspect that there are situations when you have multiple lands, like 2 Valakuts, everything else. You have a few fetch lands in play, you play Triad, and you'll win because you have so many triggers.
Yeah. Even there is also... we won't make an episode entirely about Crimson Vow impact on Modern because there won't be much of it, I think.
Yeah.
But there is a card that I've heard Arilax mentioned recently in their podcast. Don't remember the name. It costs 4 mana, 3 and a green, and you are looking at top 7 cards of your deck. You are taking 2 lands off of it and put them onto the battlefield, and the rest goes at random on the bottom. And if the math on it is actually quite promising, because if you are running a 4 of like Valakut, for example, and you haven't drawn any of those, if you put this spell on the stack around like turn 4 or something, you have roughly 50% chance to hit Valakut in the top 7, which is a bunch.
Reasonable.
And it gives you resources basically because it draws you to lands and plays them. So this is a card that might be an interesting bridge in those Valakut decks. But for now, we will focus on those 3 aforementioned core archetypes: Ephemerate, Control, and Rhinos. So first of all, we have to ask ourselves a question: why is it worth, or why is it even possible to play 4-color decks? I guess the more accurate question is it worth? Because it was always possible, but what makes it truly a good option? And the answer, in short, is triumphs.
Yeah.
We've been accustomed to fetch lands throughout most of our Magic history.
Carry.
So it's something that we just take for granted, basically. Yeah, we have fetch lands, we have shock lands. In standard, when we don't have shock lands or other fetchable lands to pair with fetch lands, we're playing 2, maybe 3 colors. In modern, it was always standard to play 3 colors. So like playing 3 colors with fetch shock mana base is not hard. But with triumphs, it actually turns out that playing 4-color mana bases is not that hard. If you want to commit a bit more, especially if we are playing green and you can play Ren and 6.
That's kind of rude because there aren't all the triumph combinations around, so we won't know how the lack of triumph affects, for example, Esper to be.
What's you already said that the streets of however it's called, I don't remember. It's something. I always call it Streets of Acapella, which is obviously not true. But the mafia inspired the crime setting that will drop after Kamigawa, it will be a 3-color combinations, and I think it's been hinted that there will be triumphs in this set. It wasn't confirmed in any. I don't think it was ever confirmed by anyone from WotC, but there are speculations, so there's some chance that we will get to see those triumphs. I personally think that, for example, I don't think Esper would be suddenly playable with Esper Triumph, but it's definitely something that's helpful. Like, for example, maybe you want to play a Band Triumph in 4-color instead of one of the triumphs you already have, or a Naya Triumph instead of one of those. So more options for customization is always a welcome thing. So we already established which decks we want to talk about and why you can play 4 colors. So now let's dive into what connects all of those decks. It's except for colors, that they play, that they share. And as we already briefly mentioned a couple of times, the centerpiece of those decks is Omnath, Locus of Creation, for various different reasons. So first of all, Omnath is just a very good card. And it's, as Sodek mentioned before we start recording, it's basically the last survivor of Fire era design, because Oko got banned, Uro got banned, Field got banned. Omnath is just...
Once Upon got banned.
Once Upon Time got banned.
I think they were not, like, Wizards were not counting Omnath as a Fire design, but I think they underestimated how easy it could be played on curve for mana, and maybe a legendary edition because of Commander maybe changed a bit of it. Also, the synergy with Fetchland is really powerful because like Omnath without fetchlands would be a fine addition, but nothing spectacular. But
I
with
don't think
fetchlands,
I don't think it would be very playable in modern.
yeah, in modern, of course, but in younger formats it would be fine. But in with fetchlands, it breaks many rules that mid-range had, or at least were using in previous years, and Omnath lets you catch up in situations when you should be at least still behind but moving ahead. With fetchlands, with Omnath plus fetchland, you can gain both card and tempo advantage, which is, in my opinion, a
Yes.
huge boost.
Obviously, like Sodek already hinted, the fundamental rule of Magic that Omnath is maybe not breaking but abusing is tempo, and the one of the advantages of playing cheap spells is not only do you have plays early on, but then you can double spell when your opponent is playing a single spell per turn. For example, it was the way that Death Shadow decks were winning against like mid-range decks back in the day, because mid-range deck was paying 4 mana for Sea Rhino and you were paying 4 mana for 2 or 3 spells. And now with Omnath you can play 2, 4 or 5 drops on turn 5, which is insane.
Yeah.
So, and but let's be honest, Omnath is a way better 4 drop than Sea Rhino. Even without guarantee, even like Omnath without a mana ability is a better 4 drop than Sea Rhino. Drawing a card, gaining life is better than Sea Rhino. And then you also can play another one, which is like insane. So Omnath is a great card. We already established that. Also, a very like the thing that is kind of a restriction on Omnath, which is that you have to pay for different colors for it. It's also one of its biggest strengths once you can meet those mana requirements, because you can pitch it to any pitch spell you want in your deck. You can pitch it to
huge.
Solitude and Fury are the 2 mainstays. I think every Omnath deck is playing for Solitudes. Most of them are playing for Furies as well. I know that the Control version of it is playing like 1 Fury sometimes 2.
Yeah, because they have other removal spells, so they don't need a Fury that much.
Yeah, but Solitude is in every single of those decks. Endurance is a staple in the sideboard of many of those as well. And then some of them are playing Force of Vigor, some of them are playing Force of Negation. For example, Rhinos are playing for Force in the main deck.
I think Rhinos are the best example of why Omnath is so good as being a fuel for pitch spells, because Rhinos needs to cheat on spells and needs to sacrifice this turn 1 and turn 2 to make powerful plays later. And Omnath is a great glue that holds this deck together, because it doesn't matter if you need Force of Negation plus Force of Vigor or any of elementals, you will always have something to pitch. And without Omnath, I think it would be hard to have enough cards to stable cast your pitch spells on time. Because if you would have only monocolored spells, it would be impossible to play pitch spells. And something that can be used for all of your spells is actually great. It's like a. Do you remember Reaper King? It was
I do. It was a Scarecrow that costed.
Yeah, it was a 5-color card that could be pitched for everything. It was
or like Conflux, Progenitus.
Yeah, at the very beginning of Modern, there were some decks that were trying to just cast without lands, and were casting only pitch spells, and they were playing these strange 5-color cards just to be able to cast spells. And Omnath is one of them, but it's also a great card by itself.
True.
Which is huge.
True. Also, the success of those decks is definitely, to varied degrees, depending on a precise version of the deck, is tied quite closely with how crucial creatures are in Modern right now. We mentioned that many times, and we will mention it many times in the future, probably. Creatures are the centerpiece of Modern right now, and the duo of Fury and Solitude is just so good against creatures. So that's a very important aspect. I would say that the 4-color Ephemerate deck is the one that is the most geared, or the best geared towards winning against a bunch of creatures. I've played Murktide the other night, and I got paired against the 4-color deck with Ephemerate, and even though I won one of the games, I felt quite hopeless in the match. It didn't help that I was playing against Jabberwocky, but even against an average model opponent, I think it would be an uphill battle for any deck that's interested in forcing through creatures early and often.
Okay, hot take. I have an idea. Do you think that we can end in a metagame that creatures won't be that widely played because Fury and Solitude are so
definitely.
good?
I
was thinking about it.
Yeah. I can definitely see the world in which Solitude and Fury are the victims of their own success. I think it happened, like not with those cards precisely, but many times over Magic history, right? Like, for example, something that Alan mentioned on our Polish podcast recently, that now we got a reprint of Talia Gardens of Traben in Standard. And the only way that he can see it not being a main deckable card in White Winnie is exactly this case. That Talia is so prevalent that people are moving towards creature-heavy strategies, and then you are sideboarding Talia. So I think the similar story can happen with
yes,
Solitude
with Fury.
and Fury.
Yeah, but I was thinking about it right now, and the creatures in Modern are like these cheap ones. For example, Ragavan. For example, creatures when played with Hammer are so powerful that like the creature decks will punish the metagame without Fury and Solitude very fast. So I don't feel we will ever end in a situation when we won't see these special elementals around.
I think that we want or likely we want in this current card pool, we would need a very strong combo printings or creatureless printing of other sorts to push in the other direction.
Yeah, I think that big mana needs another
strong
another
card.
push. Yeah. Like
I think Tron needs something strong. Really strong.
Tron, like it sounds ridiculous because how powerful Tron is when it has its powerful openings, but I feel that Tron can be overpowered by fair strategies. For example, Omnath Solitude plus 1 or 2 counter spells can deal with Tron if Tron stumbles a bit on the draw. And I feel that to bring the balance again, Tron would love to see one more good card. I don't know if it's about something like I have Fugin to not run out of threats, or something that like I don't feel that the deck needs threats. I feel that the deck needs to be more stable.
I think it needs something like crop rotation to just be more consistent and faster.
Yeah, crop rotation or any.
Yeah, some way to, because as you said, I don't think that the problem is with how impressive those threats are, because they are impressive. Like Karn on turn 3 is still very good, but you need a way to
make sure you have Karn on turn 3.
Make sure you have Karn on turn. And maybe better ways to punish the hate, because mainly due to Urza's Saga, cards like Alpine Moon, Blood Moon, Spreading Seas are very popular. So maybe you need a sideboard card in the line of 2 mana, Disenchant plus Sylvan's Crying in 1 card.
OMG.
Something like this.
Oh, maybe. Like, I can't imagine about this type of card, but you know.
Well, you if you word it like destroy target artifact or enchantment, then search, it's not a main deckable card because you need a target. So
yeah, that's true.
So maybe like this kind of power level, I think. You need something that both answers their threats and pushes your
strategy
forward.
Or like at least a huge scry action. Like destroy plus look at some cards, you can put something at the top. Something like this. Okay, this is not our topic today. We are talking about 4-color. And about 4-color, I also would like to mention how Omnath negates the negative aspect of pitch spells we have in the format. I will talk about Fury and Solitude, and then I will compare this to older pitch spells we had. Right now, Fury and Solitude is a card that can be cast early for the cost of another card from hand, and it's obviously very powerful, especially with Fury. We talked about it earlier in earlier video, but there is also a downside. The card to be hard casted, it costs 5 mana. 5 mana is a lot, but Omnath makes this 5 mana cost not a cost at all, because you play on turn 5 Omnath plus fetch land to get this to negate this drawback. Because earlier, if you compare it to Force of Will, for example, Force of Will was a free spell but a very high cost, losing one card, and later on it was still a 5 mana something. There wasn't any spectacular ways to make this Force of Will cheaper, at least in the last years in Legacy. And it's extremely easy to find this 5 mana thanks to Omnath's second ability with Fetchland to hardcast Solitude and gain this advantage back. So, okay, and I forgot about one side note, and in my opinion, it's also very random that it happened, but it's actually quite important in terms of deck building. Fury and Solitude are elementals, so is Omnath. And there is one companion that's looking for elementals, and like other tribes, but I can't even say cats.
How many of there are 5 of them. How many can you name?
Cats, elementals. That's it.
Dinosaurs, cats, elementals, nightmares. And I don't think it's beasts. I think it's something else, because Kahira is cat beast itself. I don't think it's beast.
Hard to say. Overall, I don't think that when Wizards were designing companions and they were thinking about this interaction, especially the like when they were creating companions, the companion rule was different, so companion wasn't going to hand, and going to hand was actually really good for Solitudes.
Yes. And I've checked, it's beast. The 5th type is beast.
Nice. So this very random thing that happened, that all these Fury, Solitude, and Omnath are elementals, ended to work really well with Kahira. And as we all know, having companion for free is better than not having a companion most of the times.
Yeah. It had to be beast, because the only companion, because if it wasn't beast, then you couldn't play more Kahiras in your Kahira deck, and Lurus is the only companion that you can't play in the main deck if that's your companion. And then you can only play one Lutri in Lutri decks, but other than that, you can play up to like 3 copies of your companion in your aside from the 4th copy in your sideboard. Okay, so we kind of covered why those cards are good, why those decks are good, why people are playing them, kinda. But what could or should you do if you are either unable or unwilling to play those decks?
You're unable or unwilling. You are unable or unwilling.
I'm definitely unwilling. I do think I own most of those cards, and if I don't, I will just buy them. And I can just rent them on Modo or buy them on Modo.
Yeah, like for example, I have all cards for 4-color Rhinos, but I just don't feel it's my playstyle. Like it's too mid-rangey for me. It's
I
like
think I
a
think
bit too fair.
Omnath is one of my least favorite Magic cards.
What?
Like it, or even maybe not that, because Omnath is, I guess, a pretty sweet card, but I think it exemplifies the playstyle that I am not a fan of. I think Omnath Yorion decks are the decks that are not really what I like, and luckily you can beat them.
Yes.
So
Somehow.
I've been I was talking to Canister yesterday because we played in our shop as we do every Wednesday. Then we went to grab some food, and while we are eating, we are talking about this stuff about 4-color decks, and we agreed upon that upon the fact that you are not really beating those decks with cards, but with strategies. I think it's a pretty agreed upon statement, because even cards like Blood Moon, okay, sometimes Blood Moon will be great, obviously, against those decks, but other times they will have 2 basics fetched and Abundant Growth on the other one. So it's not that great. It's much easier to beat those decks on like a fundamental level. For example, those decks fall to fast combo, like Belcher. And Belcher, on top of that, plays Blood Moon, which...
So have
if
even
it's
more
not-
free wins, yeah?
Yeah, like, it's definitely not like preventing you from winning as a Belcher player. Like, it can only help.
Yeah.
Or like, for example, Tron is probably a pretty great deck against 4-color. Like,
But
I think Tron is pretty good.
yeah, actually, what I think there are still differences about all each of these four color archetypes.
Definitely.
I feel that the only thing that's true for all of these 3 is that Blood Moon is really good. And
I think it's also varied. I think when I was talking the other day to Canister, I've had this, or my perception of how good Blood Moon is against those decks. We're talking mostly against Ephemerate and the like control version, and not so much about Rhinos. And I said that I think that Blood Moon is very good against the control version, and it has potential to be good off of turn 1 Ragavan, for example. Turn 2 Blood Moon is good against the Ephemerate Abundant Growth version. And Canister said that that's pretty much true. Because turn 3 Blood Moon is might be too late. Like, for example, if you're opening as a 4-color Ephemerate player, is like, if you have a fetch land and basics in hand and Abundant Growth, like, you'll never lose to Blood Moon in this hand.
Yeah, like I feel that turn 2 Blood Moon either on the play or on a draw will be always good. Turn 3 Blood Moon on the play can be relevant. Turn 3 Blood Moon on the draw will have draws when it won't do that much. Like it's still really powerful because, for example, it decreases the power level of Omnath. So, for example, they can't double spell you, or they can't so freely play their threats plus interaction. So, for example, if you start with Blood Moon, then you have more threats, then Blood Moon will still do the work, even if they have like 2 or even 3 basics. But overall, I feel this, and maybe if you are playing a fast combo deck that is not affected by elemental package, it's also advantages you. But outside that, I feel all these decks have differences about good and bad.
Yeah. So let's start with the Ephemerate deck. I think this is the deck that is least punished by things like Blood Moon, and most punished by your opponent deviating from just winning with creatures. So
yeah, like as long as you are not playing, as long as you are playing their game, you won't likely win. For example, if you're playing
I don't
creatures,
think that's the case. I don't think that's the case. I would say as long as you're not relying on creatures, you will probably win. Because, for example, Blue-White Control is a very fair deck. And I think Blue-White is pretty good against the Ephemerate version. Because, like, what are those Solitudes and Furies doing? Oh, well, I guess Fury kills Planeswalkers, but Solitudes and Ice Fangs, like, they are not doing that much.
Okay.
When I'm playing almost weekly against Canister and I'm playing Grixis, I don't think I've lost yet. And he always says that I'm super, super lucky, of course. But the truth is that if you're playing a deck that has creatures like Ragavan, but you don't really care if they survive, and you don't build your game plan upon them surviving, the same way like Murktide do, for example. Murktide does. It's significantly harder for the Ephemerate version to win if they can't utilize their pitch elementals that only deals with creatures and to some extent planeswalkers properly. So I would say that this is definitely true for Ephemerate. I would say that blue-white or like blue-white, the 4-color version of planeswalkers is obviously a halfway between blue-white and the Ephemerate version, the actual blue-white and Ephemerate version, when you are trying to play the similar philosophy to blue-white. But you are a bit more tap out, obviously, because you have Expressive Iteration, you have Brandon 6, you have Omnath. So I think that the impression that Canister got, for example, was that while the Ephemerate version is somewhat of a meta deck, and you need to be great against creatures, like you are great against creatures, so if the metagame is revolved heavily around creatures, it's a good choice. He was having an impression that it's almost the other way around with the 4-color deck, with the 4-color control deck. You are not great against meta decks, but you are good against random stuff. Because you are not as good as killing creatures, not nearly as good at killing early creatures as the 4 Furies, some more lightning bolts and stuff deck, as you are with the 4-color control deck. But you are much better against like Tron, for example, game 1, or Combo, because you don't have 0 counter spells in the main deck, you have 8 of them. So
7 to be exact.
Or even more, because sometimes we are playing Force of Negation in the main deck as well.
Yeah, like I saw Gabriel Nassif's version with 3 Force of Negation for counter spell.
No Archmage's Charm?
No. Like Archmage's Charm requires so much blue mana that they probably decided against that.
Yeah, I guess it's not very good
with... Nassif didn't have it, I'm pretty sure. Overall, I feel that this 60-card Kahira version as a blue-white with Renin 6 and Omnath, and only 1 Fury. Like it has, it does not have that many high variance matchups. So, for example, if someone would ask me what they should bring to the big tournament, for example, Modern Showcase or CFB or whatever, I personally feel that this 4-color Omnath version without Ephemerate with 60 cards should be a bit better positioned, because
might be true.
You can outplay your bad matchup still. So, for example, when I'm playing Belcher, and I'm not even hiding that I'm a Belcher player now, I would love to play against Ephemerate all the time, because it's like so good. It's
a very good matchup, yeah.
But versus this 4-color blue-white, it's still okay. You can still present enough threats that they will run out of counters, but it's not as free. You can't just keep random 7s and win from there. You need to have your plan, you need to have your reasonable draws, and if opponent decides to win against you, they can just put even more counters. They have 60, not 80 cards, so they will see them more often. And then after one Omnath, plus, like they can play Terror for Omnath, they have Force of Negation into your Belcher, or like countering your Belcher or Blood Moon, and suddenly you are at the clock. They can play even more spells, and this is a problem. This starts to be a problem. It's still, I think, Belcher has an advantage, but it's not by that much.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that the 4-color blue-white, as Sodek calls it, is a pretty accurate, I guess, name to differentiate between those two. I don't think that the word differentiate means that, but whatever.
Yeah, and I also want to mention one thing that like remember when blue white started to be a deck, like at the very first weeks, like everyone said that blue white is unplayable because unholy hit kills your planeswalkers, and that's not the case right now because unholy hit isn't as much played, but still the deck was like the old blue white was very hard on Chalice of the Void because there were a lot of this one CMC decks around, right? And cascade decks. Right now, the amount of these low to the ground strategies is not high enough to play Chalice in blue white. So if you don't want to play Chalice, what are other reasons to stop you from playing better cards like Vren or Omnath? Assuming your mana is good, and thanks to Triumphs, the mana is good. So I totally understand this evolution, and I can see blue-white being a bit less played in the next weeks, thanks to this 4-color rise. Mainly because Omnath is a beast. Technically elemental, but beast in terms of power level.
Well, I think blue white still will be very popular because blue white is always popular, even if it's bad. But I kind of agree. I think the biggest advantage of blue white is that if you are aware of Blood Moon, and if Blood Moon is really popular, I think you'd rather play blue white than 4-color.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of why blue white has any advantages over 4-color. Maybe if more main deck Blood Moon decks or sideboard fork Blood Moon decks, like for example, I don't know, Prowess or decks like this emerge once again. I think this is. I'm not saying that blue white then is definitely better than 4-color, but it's a consideration at least. Okay. And then finally we have Rhinos. I don't have much to talk about or much to say about the 4-color Rhinos. That's like specific to that deck. Obviously, you will like the difference between how it plays out. Like it's much closer in how it plays out to the regular Rhino deck than it is to those 4-color Ren Teferi decks.
Yeah.
So you're basically a Rhinos deck with more staying power later on. You're not playing stuff like Season Pyromancer. You are playing stuff like Omnath, which is definitely a better card.
Yeah.
You have Solitude, and beforehand there was cards like Murktide Regent, which was the problem. Like you're making 2 Rhinos and your opponent is playing a 5/5 Regent, or God forbid like an 8/8 Regent, so it can block. It doesn't really die to like bolt to block plus Fire Eyes or something like this. It can kill you as quickly as you can kill them with Rhinos, so Solitude definitely great in that matchup. Yeah. Anything to add about Rhinos?
Like I often hear a question. Like maybe many people asking me why it's not why. If 4C or Timur Rhinos are the way to go. And the more I think about it, the more I like 4-color version. The only disadvantage right now is Blood Moon. And like all these like all in all other situations, it's just better to have better cards because you can do more if your Rhino plan fails. And overall, I feel like I don't want to say that playing Timur Rhinos is a mistake, but I feel you need to have a really good reason to not try to play Yorion Rhinos. Because playing 80 versus 60 cards instead of casting Rhinos is close to the same because you have just more cascade spells. So your main game plan is not affected by having more cards, but you have more ways to play if something goes wrong. So that's why I will opt for, like, in my opinion, 4-color Rhinos should be the way to go for the archetype. And I would love to be surprised by something strange. And I would love to know why Timur is better. And I'm curious what we'll see in the showcase and the CFB event if Rhinos can make a comeback. Overall, the position of Cascade decks isn't terrible, but it's also not the best. There are fewer and fewer decks that are auto losing to Cascade strategies because they are heavily prepared or they are out of the meta, so you won't play against them. So I feel that more and more often Cascade decks have to do something more than just present your goldfish. You need to present your goldfish plus have interaction. So if that's the case, your fail rate increases, and you will more often not have this force of negation versus Terfree Teferi, for example. And you can, for example, because you are scared of this Teferi, you, for example, have to go for turn 3 Shardless Agent, you return to creatures, they go Solitude, Fury another one, and you are stopped.
Well, in that scenario, I think you're still a winner. If you spend 1 card and they spend 4 cards, you're still a winner.
Yes or no, because that means that they will have time to cast a fairy and you won't play another. Like, you play your Shardless, for example, and return creatures, they play Teferi, they kill your creatures, then play Teferi, for example. Or play
Sure, but you
Solitude.
still have Shardless in play.
Yeah, that's
You
true.
still have like
but
Fire Eyes, something like this. So
in Rhino scenarios, yes. In Divine scenario, is much harder.
that's true.
Rhinos.
Well, but in Living End scenario, it's less often that 1 Solitude and 1 Fury will kill your creatures, right?
Kinda.
So
like all comes down to how good your cyclers are. Because like if you have 3 rate to break the balance, that's okay, obviously good. But on the other hand, Living End has one huge problem. It can be countered in more ways. For example, Endurance is a card that, like, if I compare how many cards people will side in versus Rhinos and how many cards will be sided versus Living End, the Living End will nearly always see more hate. In my opinion, it's mainly because, like, you are using another resource. You're using Graveyard, so it's easier to attack you. So Living End is a spell-based deck that also using Graveyard. So, like, for me, this was never a good place to be in Modern. But Living and Draw Power can let you play this strategy from time to time and win.
okay.
But
I would like to commentate about the Rhino things, the 4-color versus Rag. I do think that you are kind of diminishing the advantages of the 3-color version. I think 2 main ones are what you mentioned already, which is Blood Moon. And the other one, which is I think very important, is that in 80 cards, you are seeing your Force of Negations less, and you are seeing Violent Outbursts less. So the combination of Violent Outbursts plus Force of Negation, which is the best thing you can do, and or your Fire Eyes into Cascade draws are less likely to happen. You can, of course, play the 4-color version without Yorion, which is also a possibility. And some people are doing that. I know that Dumeg was testing it as well. Don't know what he landed on after all that time. We can check it real quickly because we have social media and stuff like this. last time he played Rhinos.
I think he said he's locked on 4-color Rhinos with Yorion.
Yeah, and he likes Firewalker as a plan against Burn. He just cascades into Firewalker.
Like if you have 12 cascade spells and Burn, Rhinos were also were always a deck that that sideboard slot were like this classic 4-4-4-3 or 4-4-3-3 with companion, and having the card that's good only in one matchup is so strange to me. Like, okay, I get it, core wins versus burn, but what else? What other matchups you want to side out Rhinos to have core firewalkers?
Probably none. But yeah. Somebody asked Doomwake on Twitter, which is, I guess, kind of the same question we are asking now. I'm sure you've commented on it before, but what do you feel the Yorion version struggles against more where the regular version doesn't? And the answer is basically what we were saying. Linear decks where you draw Force of Negation and sideboard cards less often. And I think that the sideboard is also a part where the Yorion version struggles. So basically, to sum it up, I think that Rhinos, I think that the Rag Rhinos, the 60 card 3-color version, is better if you think that your turn 3 shardless agent is not that great, because it's better at playing Blood Moon. You can play main deck Blood Moon even in that deck. It pitches to Fury as well. Your sideboard is better because you see it more often. You have better nut draw of Fire Eyes into Cascade or Cascade into Fire Eyes to slow down your opponent, or Outburst Force of Negation. So if you don't think that the regular game of Magic is like, the 4-color version is better if you are playing against Teferi all day, and the Rag version, the 60 card, is better against stuff like Combo. Against stuff like Big Mana, against stuff like, I don't know about Hammer, maybe against Hammer as well. Probably yes. So
Solitude is a powerful card, and I think it's I would probably like to be in the 4-color seat.
Well, you can just play Force of Vigor, right?
You still do,
but you will see it more often.
But you are searching for not only 4 cards but also Solitudes. Like after you survive these early attacks on turns, like you survive early wave of Hammer, then you play your threats, then you keep more interaction. That's the game plan usually.
Maybe you can do the similar thing. Maybe you can do the similar thing in Hammer versus Rhinos that you do against Burn. Maybe there is a card you want to cascade into.
And that's the problem.
I don't think that cascading into Ancient Grudge, for example, is that great.
No, it's kind of poor. But I remember when Travis Wu was playing Living End like years ago, and he was a fan of going Cascade into Stone and Silence versus Affinity.
Yeah, but Hammer is much better against Stone and Silence than Affinity.
Yeah,
right?
but Stone and Silence isn't that good versus Seeker Side because you can just attach and attack.
Yeah, so I do think that there are definitely merits to play 3-color 60 card Rhinos over the Yorion Rhinos, but both decks are good, I think. And I think that if you play one of them, I think it's usually hard to say before the tournament because you don't really know. Like you can predict metagame with some probability, but I think that both of those decks have enough strengths and weaknesses that it's very, very hard to say before the tournament which is better. You can say it afterwards, of course, when the information is not that useful because, well, it's over. And it kind of boils down to preferences, I think.
Yeah, maybe.
I would play 3-color personally. I think it's a bit more stable and more. You're still playing all the good cards. You're playing. Okay, you're not playing Omnath, you're not playing Solitude, but it's not like you are playing stuff like, I don't know. You're not playing Subtlety anymore, like the first versions, or you're not playing, I don't know. all are like bad cards. All merfolks are obviously bad, but like you know what I'm saying. You're not playing poor cards. You're playing new cards. You're playing pitch spells. Your worst card is Seasoned Pyromancer or Dead Gone, and these cards are okay. So okay, we are almost over 50 minutes, so I think it's time to end. So to recap, why 4 color is good. You have good mana that can support your spells, so it's worth playing them. Omnath is a great card by itself and can pitch to anything. And if you want to beat those decks, the best way to do so is by playing a strategy that's inherently good against them, although it varies from archetype to archetype. It's not. I don't think there's a hard and fast TLDR that we can provide you here. Just don't skip this video.
I would say that okay, maybe it will sound strange, but I feel that Belcher is quite safe as a choice versus all these 4 color decks. And if I'm playing Belcher, I really want to play against them. But you'll be obviously great versus Ephemerate, okay versus 4 color blue white, still okay versus Rhinos. They don't have that many forces. Outside that, I would avoid playing creatures. For example, with so many solitudes / this, even if I really like Yavmot, I don't feel it's the best time to play Yavmot. Playing Murtide is kind of sketchy. The deck is good, but Solitude can be problematic.
I still don't like Murktide all that much right now.
Even if it won a challenge.
Yeah, I do think Sunday. that I do think that the Consider version is much better than the Thoughtscour version. I also really like the Jace the Mind Sculptor sideboard plan. I think that goes a long way in beating those Solitude decks. So I think Murktide is better position than when we were talking about it last week, and we recorded the last week episode 2 weeks ago. So there was a significant change in the metagame. So I do think that Murktide is okay.
Okay, how about the decks like Jan Saga?
Nah, I don't think that Saga can beat Omnath consistently. Yeah, I think that for the same reason Red Black is terrible, because Red Black can't beat Omnath. Yeah. I saw Menguchi playing Red Black, and he just took the list that Spike won the tournament with, the challenge last week, and he played it. Then I saw the next tweet. I played against 3 Omnath decks, so this is the version I'm going for now, and it had Blood Moons in the sideboard to swap lures for Blood Moons against Omnath, and then next tweet was I was still losing to those decks, so I'm not gonna play it because Omnath is very popular right now. And I do think that this is definitely true. Okay. I think that's all we wanted to talk about. Next week, we are gonna talk about how Modern looks like before the Las Vegas event. What would we play? What would we avoid? Stuff like that. So,
or at least how your sideboard should be built in this random meta.
Yeah, be sure to check it out. And as always, links are in the description to our Patreon. If you're watching us now for the first time, or you're tired of waiting full month to see it for free on YouTube, our Twitters, Twitch accounts, everything you need to know is down there. So check it out. Take care, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
See ya.